Okay, we'll quickly continue our journey through the documents, the document systems, document tools, and now we have a new presentation. Well, Alexandra isn't there, but Younes Bahloul and Adam Retter are going to tell us more about Petal. I think it was 3 years ago, Adam, that you first mentioned it, 2 years ago.
I'm not sure. It could be 4,
Okay.
actually.
So tell us all about the new developments and how things are going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to this presentation about Petal and how it can simplify your technical documentation workflow. I'm Younes, and I'm an engineer at Evolve Binary. I work with Adam, and alongside with Alexandra, I've been developing Petal and under Adam's supervision. Unfortunately, Alex couldn't be here today. So let's begin. What is Petal? Petal, it's an editor for technical documentation, and it runs on your browser. It's designed for ease of use. And it creates and edits documents in LwDITA. And this is where the XML bit comes in. So we're going to be talking about lightweight data. What is lightweight data? It's a subset of data that we found really suitable for technical documentation. It's not too complex like data or docbook, but it's more expressive than Markdown, which is, it hits the sweet spot for us. And it has multiple authoring formats, and we are focusing on XData, which is XML, and that's our authoring format. And we've also introduced a new format, which is JSON-like, that we've called JData. We have been approached by the OASIS to standardize this. So what does Petal do? It lets you create and edit LwDITA documents, but you don't have to install anything, and you don't have to edit syntax. So you're not going to be interacting with XML, JSON, or Markdown. It's just going to be text on your browser. So what's new in Petal? We have better standard compliance now. We've also introduced image support and localization. And the most exciting things for today is integration with GitHub. So how does Petal integrate with GitHub? We created this GitHub app, and it's called PetalBot, and it's supposed to abstract a lot of complexity from the contributor. So when she tries to make a contribution, she doesn't have to interact with GitHub at all. It all happens in Petal, and that's what we're going to demo today. So Adam can take it from here.
OK,
So
thank you,
please go
Younes. So we've prepared a demo, which comes in, sorry, I'm going to try and change the screen here. It comes in 3 parts. And it's to try and demonstrate how you would use Petal. Sorry, this cable is annoying. And the first part of the demo is going to be myself. And I'm going to play the role of a maintainer of an open source project that has some technical documentation, but they are not too, how to say it? Their technical documentation isn't perfect, and they would really welcome some help improving it, either from people contributing to the project or other users that are perhaps using the project. So I have a project called City EHR. And this is actually a real project. It's not my project, but this is their documentation. And it's an open health informatics system. You can go and read all about City EHR somewhere else. It is using Xforms and a lot of other XML technologies, yes. Thank you, Stephen. Yay, Xforms. OK, cool. So this is their documentation website for their quick start guide. It's pretty basic HTML with a table of contents, and It's not nicely formatted, but I'm not a web person, so I'm not concerned about formatting. What I'm concerned about is the content and the structure of the content. So as the owner of the CityHR documentation, I have my website, and I also have a PDF version, which I'll just show you. Here we are. And the PDF version, unsurprisingly, looks much like the website. There is a table of contents, and we can go to each section, and we can see the images and the things that the Quick Start Guide tells you have to do to use CityHR. OK. Thank you. That took about 8 weeks to figure out how to do an XSLFO, but I got there. So thank you. I like XSLFO, but I'm not a frequent practitioner of it, so I have to remind myself how to do things. OK, so we have our documentation, and as I mentioned, I'd really like non-technical team members of CityHR to be able to contribute to this. The difficulty is perhaps that my documentation is in GitHub, which is not a problem per se, but it has to be written in some sort of format that I can process and turn into a website. And perhaps unsurprisingly, this documentation is written in LwDITA format. So we can see this is the LwDITA. It's quite simple. As we said, LwDITA is a small tag set. And that is the documentation for the source code, sorry, for this page here, download user resources. So what has happened is, as the maintainer of this project, and I want people to contribute, I have discovered Petal, thankfully. And I'd quite like to install Petal and see if I can get some people contributing to my documentation. So the first thing that I am going to do is actually install Petal. So PetalBot is an app that's available on GitHub right now. And you can go to GitHub Apps and find PetalBot. And I'm going to install it onto my repository that hosts my documentation. So let's fire that through. And the documentation, whilst it is a real project, so as not to disturb their project during this conference, I forked their documentation over to my company so that I'm not messing around with their stuff in the conference. So we're going to install it into Evolve Binary. And let's authorize that. OK, so when it takes me to this page, and we need to improve the confirmation perhaps, this is telling me that PetalBot is installed and ready to go. And I can see an open example page of documentation that's editable. And the problem that I have now is on my page of documentation, there's still no way to edit this. So I need to make it really easy for the user to be able to edit this. So what I would like to do is add a button to this page that says something like edit this page. So let's do that. So my website happens to be generated using XSLT, but you could use Jekyll or some static site generator, or you can do it in PHP or Java or anything that you want, really. What we need to add to talk to Petal is simply a hyperlink, a HTML hyperlink that when the user clicks something, takes them off to Petal with some parameters. So we've got a hyperlink wrapped around an input button that's going to say, edit this page. And I'll show you what the hyperlink looks like in a moment. OK, so I'm going to save that and commit it to my documentation. Let's clear this. Let's make it a bit bigger so people can see what I'm doing. Add my Petal button and push it to GitHub. All right, great. So what will happen is my static site generator will see that there's been a change, and it should rebuild my website for me. OK, so I can see this is running at the moment. Pages is the thing that I'm interested in. I've pushed my commit that adds the Petal button. And unfortunately, nothing happens in real time these days. So I have to wait a few seconds whilst this builds. And we could put some bets on it. It's usually, what, 30 seconds, Younes? Yeah. About 30 seconds.
Sometimes in the status, it's set queue. When it says that, good luck having that run.
Yeah, so GitHub Actions, mostly OK. Anyway, so it's generated my website. Great. And it's going to deploy it for me which should happen in a few seconds. If I knew any of George Bina's XML dances, I could do one of those, but I don't know them. So, okay. Here we go. There, great. Okay, so if we come back to my website of documentation, and I reload this, I now have this rather ugly button at the top that says edit this page. But it's not about beauty at the moment, it's about functionality. So, I don't know if you can see this, but the hyperlink is relatively simple, petalevolvedbinary.com, and then there's 4 or 5 parameters that we add that basically tells it where the source code for the document is and where the rendered version of the document is. So the web version and the Git version. That's all we need to know. Okay. So I now, as the owner of this, have the opportunity for people to come along and click edit. So I'm now going to hand over to Younes, who's going to show what happens when a user comes along and edits your documentation. Yeah. Thank you, Younes. Yeah. I'll change the screen.
Yeah, let's switch the screen. As a CDAHR user, I always go back to documentation. I can't remember everything, but sometimes I found the documentation is always out of date. And I cannot remember what changed. So sometimes I'd like to update this stuff. But for now, I do have this edit this page button. So let's click it and see what happens. And click. So it opens Petal. Oh, so it looks like I have to authorize since this is the first time. I do know Petalbot, and I know the people who made it, so I do trust it. So authorize to my GitHub account. And I have to install it since this is the first time. Install Petalbot. And then I have Petal in here. So it looks like I zoomed out a little bit earlier. So this is a full view of the page. This is exactly the page as we saw in HTML with the images and everything. And I want to update a section in here. So this is outdated, no longer needed. Let's just delete this. Let's update it. The download button is, let's fix that. Is under settings, resources. Let's autocorrect this as well. And let's make this in bold because this is really important. Yeah, I always keep forgetting about this. So I made my changes. Now I'd love to publish them. And I'll say this, update, download button, location as a title, and I would say, hey, the location has changed. So the person knows exactly what they're getting. There's a description. I'll just publish my changes. So I'll probably wait for a few seconds. Some stuff is happening in the background. And by now, I have a PR. So then let's go back to Adam.
Okay. Thank you, Younes. So,
Probably share your screen.
yes, thank you. That would really help me too excited. All right. So that was Act 2, the kindly user coming and helping us improve our documentation. And then back to me as the open source project maintainer. So I've just received an email from GitHub. If you've worked with GitHub before, you know that when pull requests come in, you get an email notification. And somebody has sent me a pull request, so that's quite exciting. Let's go and have a look at that. So if I come back to my documentation repository here, let's see. One pull request. Excellent. OK. Oh, OK. So I've got a pull request, something about updating a download button from a guy called Bicamilo01. All right, let's see what this is up to. OK. Ooh, OK, so this is quite fun. This has come from Petal. So somebody has used my edit this page link to edit my documentation. That's really nice. And let's see what this person has to say. So they've made one change. Yeah, again, I can see it came via Petal. And what did they change? So what I can see here is that they've deleted this first paragraph, and they've added in this paragraph in its place, and they've decided that this thing is bold, so it must be quite important. So I do know that I released a new version of CityEHR last week, and I didn't update the documentation because I didn't have time. So I do remember moving the download location. So it's good that this person has updated the documentation for me, really. So I'm going to go ahead and accept these changes. So approve, and because we're a nice community, we're going to thank him. Thanks, Camilo. That's great. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do that in the last release. Okay, great. So let's send the review. And then I'm going to merge his pull request. Okay, great. So that's merged. As we know, all of our code is in GitHub. So his changes have gone into my GitHub branch. We can see I've merged it here. And because I'm using a site generator, if I come back to here, we'll see that my merge that I've done from the documentation update that some kind person called Camilo sent from Petal is busily generating a new website for me. So we'll just let that tick over, hopefully not too much longer now. This is where it ends up taking forever for some reason. You know, demos. Okay, good. Into the deploy phase. Come on. Oh, there we go. Great. All right, now then, for the magic reveal. Let's hope so. All right, so I'm going to come back to my documentation website, and I'm hopeful that if I reload the page, ooh, it's incorporated the changes from Petal that Younes did for me, so that's great. And also, the PDF, of course. So let's see. Sometimes this gets cached, so let's hope not. There we go. The download button is under Settings Resources. Excellent. So I'm really happy. I've had my first contribution to my technical documentation from one of my users. So that was very nice. OK, so thank you, Younes, for your PR, by the way. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to wrap up and take some questions. So I'm going to switch to this. So that's the end of our demo there. But in summary, so Petal allows you to edit technical documentation. And the nice thing is really that you can roll this out to users that don't have to be technical. They just need to know how to use a web browser. They don't need to know any syntax. They don't ever see the XML, the Markdown, the LwDITA, or anything like that. It's all abstracted away from them visually. They don't need to install any tools. They don't need to download anything. Everything is in the web browser. They don't also really need to know anything about Git or GitHub. All you need to do is ask them to sign up for a GitHub account. Once they've signed up for a GitHub account, everything else is taken care of. They don't ever have to go to GitHub again. It's just a way for us to get the documentation in with versioning, really. So everything is versioned, of course. So you can roll back their changes later if you decide you don't like them. And what I hope we've demonstrated is, and the GitHub integration with Petal is optional. You don't have to use it with GitHub. You can just use it to open files from the file system, edit them, and save them again. But I think by integrating with GitHub, we've demonstrated that you can, excuse the typo in my slide, you can have a very simple publishing workflow where you don't need technical users. The person running the project, the documentation project, needs to have a little bit of awareness of GitHub. They need to be able to merge a pull request. But otherwise, there's not a great deal that they have to do. So hopefully, we've made editing technical documentation really, really easy. And we'd like to see this used in open source projects, because there are so many open source projects that just have appalling documentation. And I'm as guilty as that as anybody else. But now I don't have an excuse. So hopefully this is much easier. And for all of the people at the conference, because this is a declarative conference, it is XML at the core. So it is the LwDITA model, which gives us lots of nice things. This is what you've seen today is really the tip of the iceberg, but DITA gives you obviously content reuse through maps and all of that lovely stuff. We've showed a little bit of single source publishing, so our LwDITA is turned into HTML and PDF, and those changes will happen, it's no problem. It's open source, so feel free to take it, play with it, do what you want. At the moment, it's running as an open service. You can use Petal evolvebinary.com. You don't have to set up your own server. And that's kind of where we're at today. I don't think I've missed too much there. Yeah, what else to say? So roadmap. Obviously needs a little bit of polish still. We're not settled on necessarily the pink or the logo or the name, but hopefully the functionality is there, the most important thing. We want to offer it as a service. As I said, it's online as a service at the moment in the state that it's in, but we'll probably turn it into something a bit more interesting, easier to integrate perhaps. Adding the HTML link to your page isn't too hard, but we can probably make it even easier. We could send the pull request to your repository that does it for you, that kind of thing. Okay. So the editor itself and the libraries behind it, they support the full version of LwDITA 1.0 draft 7. But inside the editor itself, we haven't exposed all of the LwDITA elements via the toolbar buttons and everything else. We've kept the sort of most interesting things there, like paragraphs, bulleted lists, ordered lists, italics, bold, those kind of things, sections. But we can easily add more buttons to insert these things. The functionality is there. We need to know how much people want versus just putting everything and it being really distracting. So we're thinking about that. We've got CTHR, sort of prepped to use this as our first proper user. We actually built Petal originally so that I could write documentation for Elemental, the database. And we don't have any documentation for Petal. So maybe we could write Petal's documentation in Petal. That's kind of cool, I think, somehow. And yeah, we need to let people know it's out there. So hello, it's there. Please tell your friends. And we would love some feedback. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Younes.
Kind of wish that this would have happened 6 months ago because we just, with our team, spent 3 months building a Sphinx documentation site, also using GitHub Actions. And you're doing some things out of the box that would have saved us a lot of effort. So great to see this. The reviewers in our project are completely non-technical. It's the government giving approvals for things. And even doing a diff review in GitHub would be like confusing to them because there would be line numbers. So have you considered doing even the review part in WYSIWYG?
Do you want to answer this, or shall I?
Yeah, so when it comes to review, we haven't considered this as we expect the maintainer to be able to write LwDITA. But that's a really good point that we might consider. That was like showing a diff from here and here. It's like diff checker.
Yeah.
It just shows the difference between that. And the best thing we can render it, so it's just seeing the text. It's not
Right, yeah,
gonna
the
be a
way,
big
you know,
difference.
like in Google Docs, a version history. And then the other question, because of government accessibility, we're having to make quite a few customizations to our Sphinx docs to meet these specific requirements of our specific government body. And so I guess my recommendation is to build in accessibility checking and some level of customization for that.
Absolutely. So we're keenly aware of accessibility. In the static site and PDF that you saw generated, you probably could tell no consideration has been given to it at that time. But the generation of the static site and PDF is our kind of piece that we built for this presentation rather than anything else. If you wanted to use Petal, you'd probably have your own generator with your own styling and accessibility mechanisms. Also, just to come back to what Younes said, I'd add that the GitHub integration is like an optional module that we've built. So the idea is that we're not going to just integrate with GitHub. We want to integrate with lots of other systems that can do technical publishing workflows. So if you had a particular way that you wanted to do review, that's something we could potentially build.
So my question was actually going to be about how solidly bound it is to GitHub. So I understand that's a module, but there has to be some sort of publishing mechanism behind it. You can't just edit a web page or something.
So we have two mechanisms at the moment, and Younes, you might have some ideas on this as well. You can, obviously it runs in the web browser. I can show you, am I still on the screen? Yeah. So I can show you the standalone version, which is if you just come to Petal evolve binary without going through the GitHub install app and process, you can literally just pop open a file from your computer, and it will render in here as long as it's LwDITA. And you can then edit it as much as you want and click download, and it will give you the file back. But there is no pipeline there so much. There's no review process. There's no sort of accepting the changes. But this is our base, and then the GitHub module basically just hooks in where the open and download buttons are and sort of replaces those actions by feeding the data in from GitHub and exporting it back out via our bot that creates pull requests and forks of repositories and things like that. So the import-export mechanism is highly configurable.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, it's highly modular. We're thinking about Bitbucket, any other system, so it all fits in, just plug and play.
Does that answer your question, Steve? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yes, thank you. Very great. Excited. One thing, how to make cross-references. That's one thing that documentation is full of. So can you please show that, or is it done already?
Sorry, can you say that again? How?
Cross-references.
Okay, so...
Preferably based on the keys in DITA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one of the buttons we don't have on the toolbar at the moment. However, if you bring in a document to edit that has the cross-references, it won't change them. It will preserve them and put them back out. So for things that you're not changing, it round trips them basically at the moment. I think, am I right in saying Alex was working on a side panel for properties?
Yeah, we're designing that. We're done through the design phase, and it's coming in.
So also behind, obviously, I think I can show some of this. So if I turn on debug view, you can see, okay, this is the topic. Can't read that.
That's a title.
Oh, that's title, thank you. That's the body, that's a fig.
Yeah.
And we've got paragraph, 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 ordered lists, everything like this. So obviously in DITA behind here, or LwDITA as we're using, you've got all these block and inline elements, and they have properties on them like the ID. So if you want to do cross-referencing. So what Alex is working on, or was working on, is that if you click one of these, you should be able to prop up a properties dialog where you can describe what the ID is. And then behind the scenes, you've obviously got all these IDs that you can insert as hyperlinks for cross-references. So we're on it, but it's not there yet.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I was wondering, how does Petal come in when you bootstrap a documentation project? I mean, you showed editing an existing one, but now I have my beautiful open source project. I want to add LwDITA. Hey, Petal is nice. How does that? How can you tie in then?
So if you want to start with a completely new project, what you would need to do at the moment, and this is obviously something that we want to make easier in future, you would need to create an empty repository that has a LwDITA map and an LwDITA topic. Just one to start with. So that gives it a starting point to go from. So what you're really seeing here is a topic editor. This isn't really thinking about maps at all. What we have quite a long list of things we want to build, obviously. But one of the things on that list is, the ability in here to somehow add topics into a map. So there's nothing in here at the moment that will deal with maps. These are dealing with topics. So.
Because what I see is open XData file, but not create XData file.
Yes,
The button.
exactly. Because if we create it at the moment, it needs to be added to a map somewhere. So it's kind of related to the map principle. But if you want to create a new one, you could just open an empty one. Oh, yes. So, and we know we can all do these things. I mean, frankly, I could just write LwDITA by hand. as I'm sure you could. But I think your point is that it should be simple, and that's exactly what we're trying to get to. But we're not 100% of the way there yet.